I would like to introduce Iman Boot, who is a former colleague of mine in DG Agri. He comes from DG Agri, senior expert there, and he has been working in the European Commission for more than 15 years in various areas, including enlargement, the former CAP reform, auditing and rural development and innovation. By training, he's an anthropologist and has also some fieldwork in Bhutan, which, as you know, has the happiness index. Yes. So, Iman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. First of all, perhaps I should start saying yes, I worked a lot on CAP reform, also the current CAP reform. And there's two things I want to say about this. One, I will have to leave you quickly because today is the first day in Parliament where we can see where the debate is going. So I'll be leaving quickly afterwards. And secondly, I feel a bit the odd one out here because you've got Leonard, Paula, they know what you are talking about. I do far less so. I know a lot about European agriculture. I know about the policy we have. But I was a bit embarrassed by the title I was given for successes of the CAP, lessons learned. I'm not entirely sure that what I have to say is relevant for you. So I'll just tell you what I think perhaps has some relevance on what we've done in Europe. And then it's up to you to see whether you can take things or not, or what you can do with it. What I'll do, I'll talk about three things. Yeah, so a bit on the new CAP. Well, it doesn't, so it goes too quick. Well, I'll stay here. A bit on the new CAP, on what do we want to achieve with this CAP that is currently being debated in the Council and Parliament. I'll show you, this picture shows you the 9 objectives we have for this policy, and a part of them are just, the normal stuff: farmer income, climate change, environmental care. These are things you know very well. They've been around. They will stay with us. What I wanted to point out, which 3 things that may be relevant for you as well. The first one is the 3rd objective, which is rebalancing market power in the food chain. We had our UTP proposal, unfair trading practices in the Union, because we think, and I presume this is the same all over the world, that farmers are losing out on getting a fair part of the value added they produce. So we try to come up with policies that address this issue, and I guess this has some relevance for you as well. The other one I wanted to point out was the 8th objective, which is about rural areas. And we just heard jobs and growth. This is very much an issue outside agriculture, but inside rural areas. We want to have prosperous rural areas to keep people there, but not just because we want them, because we think there's a future for them there. We want our common agricultural policy to address this issue in the different countries of Europe as well. The last objective I particularly wanted to point out concerns food and health and quality products. I think this is the sort of potentially first step in the common agricultural policy to move more, to get more attention to food issues, not in pure quantity, but in quality as well, and in health effects. We're not entirely sure how to develop this, but I guess this is a theme that is going to stay and is going to be developed in the future. When you think about developing all sorts of export possibilities, this might be an issue you want to take into account. But till so far, for the CAP-specific objectives, if this moves on. This one, okay. Yeah. Then I wanted to talk about knowledge and innovation. This is a specific and sort of overarching theme we have in the new CAP proposals. but we had it in the current cap already. And there, there's a few things. I think traditionally we all think knowledge and innovation, this is about research and getting the right knowledge. And that's correct, but it's not the entire story. You have farming practice, and at least in Europe, this tends to be far removed from the agricultural research. So we have wonderful ideas, wonderful solutions, but they do not reach the sector. Perhaps more importantly, the needs from the sector do not always reach the scientific world. So you need more interaction. Now, how do you do this? Good Lord. For us, we started looking at how do farmers inform themselves. And this has, of course, the first thing is we've been looking into this. Farmers tend to get most of their information from internet, not from advisors. The second one, and that's very interesting as well, they look at other farmers. I'm from a farm myself. I was raised with the idea that the only honorable profession is to become a farmer, so I failed completely. I became an official, but I know very well, you always follow what other farmers are doing to get ideas and to see how they do. Can we learn something? And the third one, it's not the last, but the third one is from agricultural advisors. If you know this, obviously you have to adjust your policy tools to get information across. So this is something we're trying to stimulate in the current cap, even more in the future cap. Digitization, we saw some nice examples, we heard quite a lot. This is the sort of golden dawn that is awaiting us with more productivity, new business models. Everything is going to be all right. However, and we've done a lot on this. I give you here a few web addresses so that you can find reports and things we've been doing on in this area. But for us, what is most important is we have this promise of digitization, but it's not really happening. Take-up is slow in Europe. It's very hard to get real data on the use of digital technologies, but we know that the only thing that is really widely used is what we call tramlining, controlled traffic farming. So you drive your tractor in the most optimal way over your land, but this is not rocket science, and it's not giving a lot of, it gives value added, obviously, but there's so much more possible. So why is this not happening? So we think there is clearly a role for policy to stimulate the take-up. There's also a role for policy to avoid negative externalities. I mentioned before the lacking power balance in the value chain. Digital technologies can have an influence one way or another, and we should be very careful about this. To be more precise on the take-up, we went into quite some projects to find out why is the take-up relatively low. First reason clearly is lacking infrastructure. You need to have access to internet or to a good data connection. If that's lacking, it's quite hard to develop all your digital tools you want to. Second, and this was something that struck me, is farmers have been told stories about digital technologies for a very long time. It has been oversold in the past, so they are a bit hesitant and they want to get real cost-benefit information. And this comes back to farmers trust other farmers better. They want to know what the others are doing. Do not necessarily trust officials that much, and rightly so, I think. And they don't trust scientists or people who want to sell them. You want to have really good and independent cost-benefit information. Third issue on the low uptake is related to data issues. People talk about data ownership. I think that's probably not the right term. It's access to data. And I understand this concern quite very well, because if you give access to your farm data, you give in a way access to the value added you're producing. And it's perfectly understandable that farmers are reluctant, or at least have hesitations about sharing data. The last big item that was mentioned on why take-up is low, and remember, I'm talking about Europe. I don't know whether this is relevant for you, but I guess you have exactly the same problems. The last one is the fear of lock-in. What happens if you're a farmer and you buy into the machinery of one company? Are you forced to stay with that company forever? Or you want to maintain some independence, you want to be free to make your own choices. So these are the things that are clearly there. Now, if this is the case, again, you have to adjust your policy tools. So if it comes, yeah. I'll show you what we did in Europe. On infrastructure, we try to invest a lot on broadband. It takes some time and some effort, but we really try to push this. On cost-benefit information, yes, we subsidize pilots, very low-key, doesn't have to be a lot of money, pilots that you allow to fail as well. Failures are even more interesting quite often than successful stories. And quite important, we try to invest a lot in peer-to-peer exchanges between farmers. In our common agricultural policy, but also in the research policy, because the agricultural research is managed also by DG Agri in the Commission. On data issues, we try to install a bit some data governance. We stimulate mostly the sector. We have some trace of a legislation that we started now on non-personalized data as well. But also we've been supporting COPA mainly and the machinery builders to come up with a sort of common data governance. The fear of lock-in, for the moment we haven't done anything, but luckily there we have the private sector stepping in, coming up with an ISOBUS protocol that allows you to use all kinds of machinery and it still functions. Leonard was sort of warning me, and I think this is it. This is all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Iman. And I think actually you gave a lot of food for thought of what we in the Common Agricultural Policy are doing and what are the main areas to look at. And I think a lot of things are actually common because the challenges are the same. So